You're listening to the Utah Checkdown Podcast. And now your host, Josh Furlong.
Welcome back to another edition of the Utah Checkdown Podcast. I am Josh Furlong, happy to be back with you again for another week. It's the last week of spring ball. Yesterday was tax day. Hopefully you didn't have to pay too much like I did. So with that in the background, we get to talk more college football for the week left of spring football. So Utah obviously has been working hard and trying to kind of ramp up to the spring game. That will be a little bit different, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But we've got some observations from yesterday's viewing abilities that the media had, and we'll kind of talk about some other stuff. So let's jump into that. But first, let me tell you about our partners, Canyon View Credit Union. Every possibility begins with a spark, and possibility can grow into something even better than expected. With a clear view of what matters most, your possibilities are endless. From its first flicker at the University of Utah, U First Credit Union has grown to meet its potential and ignites your possibilities. They've grown into Canyon View Credit Union. Same roots, new path. Welcome to Canyon View Credit Union. Check out the full details at canyonviewcu.com. All right. So like I said, yesterday we got another viewing ability for the media. So we got an opportunity to see some more stuff. And, I don't want to say that there isn't a ton of difference, because there is. But at the same time, it has been pretty consistent. We've seen little things that have been going on and different things that have been improved and stuff like that. And so it's kind of a piecemeal kind of situation. But at the same time, you've got a team that is still not complete, right? Like there's still things that need to be done to be able to make sure that Utah is where it needs to be in fall. So spring has been good. I have noticed more than anything that the energy and the quote unquote juice of spring camp has seemed to be up, right? Like I don't remember there being this much excitement around the team, and not even just excitement, just kind of the care to detail in spring. Now, look, I could be misremembering things, and I'm not using this as a kind of a way to hype things up and say this team is so different or anything that way. But I do think you do have a team that after the last 2 years where things have sputtered, things haven't gone as well as they'd want to, you've got a team that is really bought into whatever the process is that Utah has, right? And so you've got this team that when they get up to these spring camps, and we see the viewing ability, or the viewing period, excuse me, I keep saying availability, whatever, it is what it is. You can sense their kind of commitment to wanting to get better and wanting to be able to do more. The offense is hyped up to be able to beat the defense. The defense is hyped up to beat the offense. And it just feels like there's just a different type of energy at Utah right now. So, like I said, whether that translates in the fall, it remains to be seen. We heard good things about Utah going into last year with Cam Rising coming back. Obviously, they brought in a bunch of new players to be able to complement his skill set and do different things that way, and we saw how that turned out. So things can happen. It's easy to be able to say that spring is going well and that everything is fine and dandy, and then fall comes and things blow up. So, but I do think this team has a lot of chemistry right now. I think the way that the offense has been tailored to be able to be more plug and play has definitely helped. Kyle Whittingham talked about that yesterday, saying this offense has been better. And I'm going to post a story tomorrow about this and get into more details on it. But essentially, Kyle has talked about that in the past, back when Andy Ludwig stepped down and they made the change, and, there was a lot of talk about the offense. There was the talk that Utah needed to be different, right? Everybody knew this. This wasn't a secret. Everybody knew that the Utah offense needed to be better. And as part of that, Utah, needed to find an offensive play system, play calling style that was going to suit the current era of college football, meaning guys that are transferring in. under Andy Ludwig's system, it was a good system if you were able to mature and grow in the system. And I've talked about this a bunch, so I don't need to get too far into this. But if you grew into that system and you got comfortable and things went well, a la, Cam Rising being able to get Utah to the Pac-12 title game 2 years in a row and doing well with that offense, things worked really well. There was so much diversity in that offense in terms of what Utah was able to do. The problem was it just took so long for guys to learn it. There was a lot of, pre-snap checks that needed to be done that made it difficult for wide receivers to kind of figure out where they needed to go, or, figure out where the QB needed to go, those types of things. And if you didn't have, a lot of guys that had matured in that system, then it became a challenge, as we saw last year when Cam went down. So you saw Isaac Wilson struggle because it was a challenge to be able to learn everything. You saw receivers struggle, especially the new ones that were trying to come into the system and trying to pick it up. And so it was a challenge, right? But you're seeing this new offensive style where it's a little bit different. It's not quite the full pro-style offense. It's much more spread, RPO, situations where these guys come in and they just kind of know what their route is, right? They don't have to worry about necessarily what the defense is doing. They're just going to go run their routes. They're going to do what they need to do. It's more technical than that, right? Like, we get that. But there's a lot more simplicity to it where guys like, let's say, an Otto Tia who came in here from Utah State, he can come in there and once he kind of gets the system down, has been able to dominate a little bit more and has felt more comfortable. And now you're coming out of spring camp with basically an entirely new offensive roster. They're going into this offseason feeling confident in what they've got, right? Kyle Whittingham has talked about, they're not there yet, right? They're not fully there yet, but you're seeing an offense that feels confident. And that, more than anything, going into the offseason, beyond the spring game on Saturday, is going to bode well for Utah. If they can continue to take those kinds of leaps and continue to move that through, and I'll get into some stuff that Devon Dampier said, and I'll let you listen to some audio that he had, but kind of what he wants to do with the team in the offseason, that's going to go a long way for this team, right? As they hit fall and they hit the ground running much more quickly than maybe what would be expected. So really fascinated by that, really curious to see how this develops and grows at Utah, to see if this can work. We obviously know Devon Dampier understands the offense, and so that gives Utah a leg up. But it goes beyond him, right? You got to have guys that understand how that offense works as well, or else it doesn't really matter what Dampier does. He's got great legs, and he can showcase that and kind of be the one-man band, so to speak, for a little bit. But obviously he can't be it all. So really fascinated to see how this goes. The early signs from this have been great. Like I said, I don't want to basically lead people astray in terms of trying to hype the machine, but at the same time, everything has been trending in the right way. And I think that more than anything is kind of where, you've got to look, you've got to have that optimism. You've got to be able to embrace that, even though I know, Utah fans have been hurt the last 2 years. Embrace it, right? I think now is a time to be able to recognize that Utah has a good thing going, and obviously things can change. That's the nature of college football, and that's why the sport is played and the games are played and everything. But I think it's fine to be optimistic about things, be happy about things, and be ready for the fall. So just a few of my other observations from yesterday's viewing. Devon Dampier, when we got there, had arguably his best drive that I've seen in the short viewing periods that we've got. He mixed it up. There was several designed play calls for him. That offensive line did a phenomenal job of being able to create holes for him. He's patient, but at the same time attacks it, with speed and aggression to be able to get to where he needs to. That it really helps Utah in terms of what they're able to do, right? Like, he's not a guy that is slow by any means, and so when he hits that hole, he's going to attack it hard, and he's going to go for open space. And there was a couple that he made, whether it be off the edge or up the A or B gap, he was doing well there. And then on part of that, he's mixing the ball around, throwing it to various receivers. The drive ended with an Otto Tia about 20-yard touchdown catch right at the front of the end zone. And it was just a solid drive all around, really kept the defense on its toes. It's a good defensive unit out there. Not to say that they've been bad, but he's been able to find ways to break them. And you're starting to see much more confidence from him against this defense. There's times this year in the viewing that we've seen where the defense absolutely just is the better, right? They know what they know how to stop him, and they know what they can do to kind of confuse him, especially since they have kind of all the advantage of knowing the system. And he knows the system is on the offensive side, but knowing what Utah does and kind of how they mix things up. But you're starting to see much more confidence out of Dampier, and just kind of understanding that he can see what they're doing and he can beat them, right? There's a lot of times where they're left kind of trying to figure out what to do. And I think that bodes well. I know the biggest knock on him right now, one, is his, passing percentage, his completion percentage. Is that going to improve? So far, we've seen a lot of good things. There haven't been a lot of errors or turnovers that we've seen. I don't know what that looks like in the periods that we're not watching. But it sounds like he's been improving upon that, and he's been able to have a much better completion percentage. That's showed in the times that we've seen. But you've got a guy that is just, really embracing his role and doing well. The other knock is that, he went against defenses in the Mountain West. What's that going to be like in the Big 12 or, against power conference opponents? UCLA is the first game. That's still to be determined, right? But at the same time, it's not like he's not going against the top defense right now in Utah, right? Utah obviously brings out a tight defense, a tough defense every single year, one of the best in the league every single year. So it's not like he hasn't seen it. Obviously, it's different when the games are going on and somebody's trying to attack him and kill him, trying to get in that backfield and sack him. There will be some differences that way. But so far, he's been able to manage that well. He's been able to understand it well. There hasn't been a noticeable drop-off in terms of him not being able to go against a power forward defense, that kind of stuff. So we'll see. These are all those things that have to be proven on the field in time. But so far, it has been good for him. So outside of that, Isaac Wilson and Bird Ficklin, they're the ones that continue to split reps. It's tough to fully say who would be QB2 at this point. There's times where early on Isaac was definitely the QB2 and he was getting those kind of reps, and then Bird would kind of come in QB3 reps. Some of that has flipped a little bit where Bird is coming in instead of Isaac, but that's not an indication necessarily that is the case. They have different play calls, different things that they want to run, and so it may just be a situation of they want Bird to run this over Isaac type stuff. So it's interesting to see where that will develop. Bird has definitely made improvements, and I've talked about that. However, both quarterbacks weren't able to get the offense moving yesterday. The defense definitely won those battles, and there wasn't much to there. Some of that may be play calling in terms of what they were trying to do. Not all of this is, a guy that needs to beat the defense. It's based on kind of some things that they're trying to do, get different looks, that kind of stuff. So don't read into that too much. But at the same time, there has been a clear difference between Dampier and his backups. So really fascinated to see how that goes moving into the offseason. Really fascinated to see what we can get out of the spring game. I'm not sure, there is a different format, but there, I'm curious to see how they utilize these quarterbacks and what they do. But I think that'll be an interesting battle going into fall camp. Utah has to have a solid backup. They felt confident in Isaac Wilson last year and felt he was a solid backup, but I think they truly believed that Cam was going to be healthy for a majority of the year, and they didn't need to have to worry about that. So after the past 2 years, you would hope that Utah is much more cognizant of that, understanding that they really need a solid backup too, that can run the offense that they need to. And I think Utah has full confidence in both of these guys to be that guy. Obviously, Isaac Wilson has one more year in the system, and so he's been able to understand the kind of the speed of the game. As I've mentioned, give a quarterback one extra year, get them then that redshirt freshman year, and they'd be good. Obviously, he's not a redshirt freshman, but if you can give them 1 year, they generally perform well. So that's not to say Bird Ficklin couldn't come in there and do well, but I think, he's up against it in terms of just kind of understanding the speed and everything that way. So, we'll see what happens there. Outside of that, continue to mention Hunter Andrews. The guy is everywhere. They list him as a tight end, and he is definitely playing as a tight end, but he's much more of a hybrid tight end where he is, a running back. He's, not always on the line in terms of, hands in the dirt type situation. He's going to be used in a lot of different situations, and I think he's going to 100% be an X factor to this offense. That's to say that, Dampier's not, or Wayshawn Parker isn't going to be. There's a lot of quote-unquote X factors that are going to be here. But I think what Hunter Andrews does, and you can even lump Nate Johnson into there as well, what those two specifically are going to do, they're going to change kind of the looks that Utah can run, right? Like you can mix and match. You can have Hunter, let's say, lined up in the backfield. You can have him lined up on the line, flexed out, whatever it may be. There's a lot of variability with him as well as Nate Johnson. And so it's going to be really fascinating to see how these guys go. But by all accounts, continues to make progress every single week, continues to improve. It doesn't matter where you put Andrews. He's going to find ways to kind of get the ball, right? Or at least make an impact. So really fascinated with that one as well. Wayshawn Parker, they've utilized him, but at the same time, it's been, kind of trying to figure out some of the other backs behind him. He's definitely still kind of the RB1. I know Kyle had mentioned that it's not a done deal yet, and I would imagine that he's still not going to be that definitive at the end of spring. But I think you're seeing a clear separation with him as well. He's got a lot of patience, but he attacks the holes really well. He's able to be physical. He can get some yards after contact and different things that way. Yesterday he had a great run where he was patient, hit the hole, and then it was a track race to the end zone that nobody could touch him for a 45-ish yard touchdown. He's finding ways to be able to impact the game. He's finding ways to be physical, kind of showcase his ability. He's got a great center of balance. A lot of things that are going to bode well for him as a running back. So I think Utah, for the most part, especially at QB and a running back, they have their guys and they feel confident in them. So now beyond Wayshawn, who is his backup? And this is kind of the question that I've had for quite a while, or even then, who's the guy that's pushing him for starting reps? Right now, I still don't see anybody that's pushing him to the same level to be able to be a starter. But we've seen a lot of good things from Devon Green, Nakari Richards, Daniel Bray, but each is kind of a different style of player. And so there's not been a natural kind of guy that kind of fits in there. Maybe it's Devon Green. They were teammates, in high school. They understand each other. They played together. They're kind of different in how they play, but Devon Green has really shown a lot of progress as well. Nakari Richards is probably more of your short yardage guy, third and short, put him in and he's going to ram through the line and be able to get what he needs. Daniel Bray is probably more of your change of pace back. Kyle had talked about early on that he's definitely going to be a guy that sees the field. Freshman, still young, trying to figure out where he needs to be. But you've got a lot of variability in kind of these running backs. And so really fascinated to see how that develops as well in the offseason and who kind of emerges beyond Wayshawn. I think all of those guys will get their own reps. Does one of these guys fall off? I'm not entirely sure. The bet would be that Bray does just because he's the freshman, and so you've got other guys that are more experienced that kind of take over, and he loses some of those reps. But I think they're all different in their own ways. So I still think Wayshawn is kind of more of your bell cow back, the every down back that's going to get a lot of carries. I would assume 30-ish carries a game. We'll see what Kyle wants to land on. He gets, a set number, and it feels like that's where he goes. Mekhi Bernard, he had a set number for him, and they stuck pretty true to that. So we'll see what happens there. But Wayshawn definitely has the potential to be kind of the first every down back since maybe Zach Moss. You could argue that there were others along the way, but I'm talking more consistently. Wayshawn may be that guy. So another area of intrigue in terms of who his backups are and kind of how that moves. as far as some other guys go, Otto Tia has really come on as a receiver. I feel like he's starting to look more confident and comfortable in the system. He's been much more present on the field in terms of what he's been able to do, making a lot of plays. As I mentioned, he got that 20-yard touchdown. He just seems to kind of find the space and do what he needs to. So I think he's a guy to watch for. He obviously has had some success at Utah State, but I think there's, Utah needs more, right? And we'll see if that can happen. Beyond that, the offensive line, Kyle Whittingham says it's been as advertised. They've been great. In the viewing periods that we've seen, the O-line has given Dampier a ton of time. They've done a really good job at that first unit. I mean, you're anchored by two really solid tackles that were listed in CBS's top 150 players. Spencer Fano was listed at 21. I mean, this is a guy that is getting a ton of publicity going into the season and is living up to it. I mean, this is practice, right? But he's living up to it. He lived up to it last year. We'll see how it goes. But this offensive line is really doing its job, doing it well. They play well together. They are able to understand what the defenses are doing. They play consistently that way. The one knock here has been with the secondary center. There's been a lot of low snaps, down on the ground or just barely above the grass level where Dampier has to kind of scoop down. I have to imagine that will get fixed in the offseason. But if that's an area of concern going into fall, I would be worried about that. However, with that being said, Dampier has done a phenomenal job of being able to make plays out of that. That hasn't necessarily been a struggle for him. He's able to get the ball quickly and make something out of it. He's not rushing in the same sense that like he gets the ball and has to hurry and scramble or get a pass off. He still has time. So the offensive line has been doing their jobs despite the low snaps. But clearly you can't have that going into the season. You can't have your quarterback already in panic mode as, teams now can actually tackle him. Right now, guys can't get to him. With that said, guys haven't got to him for the most part, and so it hasn't been an issue. But at the same time, it's going to be interesting to see how that goes if we can't get it. So that's that. In terms of kind of what Kyle Whittingham has said, kind of recapping that, he said, there hasn't been a bad practice this spring. Feels really confident in what the team has been doing. They've progressed each day. However, he still wants to see more. That's typical coach speak, and I would have to agree with that. There's always more you can do. So there isn't much there. But the two position groups that he feels like have improved the most, or at least it feels like they've improved based on kind of the preseason expectations, is that wide receiver. He says especially Zach Williams is doing really well. He's really become a standout player, and I talked about that last week, how he could be potentially wide receiver one. There's a lot of guys that are starting to step up, but this is an offense or a unit that is really just being able to have the ball spread around. It hasn't been necessarily one guy outside of maybe Zach, maybe Otto Tia. Sometimes it's been other guys, Dadrian Zipperer, Creed Whitmore, different guys, but it's been much more spread around than maybe we've used to see, although Utah, you could argue that Utah doesn't pass the ball a ton. So we'll see how that goes, but he's been really impressed with kind of that position group and their level of improvement. And then on the defensive side, it's been safety. Feels like Rabbit Evans and Teo Johnson have really stepped up and done a phenomenal job of being able to lead that group. There's been some other guys, but those are the two that are kind of getting the shout-outs especially and really improving. So that's good for Utah, obviously, being able to know that wide receiver on the offensive side was the area of concern where Utah didn't necessarily have the guy, right? Not having Dorian Singer come back, losing that appeal, hurt Utah in some respects in the sense that they didn't have a guy that they felt like could be your number one guy. But, I contend that this also gives Utah an opportunity to spread the ball around, not get fixated on just one guy. Not to say that can't happen or shouldn't happen, especially if that guy can consistently produce. But this gives Dampier a lot of weapons to be able to move forward with. So considering where this was at the beginning of the season, where Kyle kind of was less than complementary in terms of the wide receivers and not feeling confident, that's a big improvement. So yeah, that's a little bit of that. Let me get into some Devon Dampier audio just to kind of see kind of his mindset going into this. So this is Dampier talking about a bunch of different things, but at the end he specifically talks about the offseason, and I want to kind of talk about that after that.
Devon, how do you feel after a month of spring ball?
I feel great. Obviously, again, I say it all the time. Coming here, I knew the defense was going to be great, so just getting that work against a great defense, especially for me personally, I feel like I'm getting better by today. And just the new guys adjusting to the new offense already here, they learn fast. So I think we're on the right track. We're moving fast. We're getting done when we got to get done.
Kyle talked about the improvement from the receivers. What have you seen from them, and how encouraged do you feel about that group?
Yeah, I think receivers are a very big quarterback-receiver chemistry thing. So just them learning how we want to run our offense and what we want to do. And, when they're able to pick that up, they're basically on the same chemistry as me. So when we both know what we're doing on the field, completions tend to come really easy. So I think we're getting a better job of just feeling each other and, knowing what's going on the field together.
Devon, where have you improved since last year with New Mexico?
Yeah, I feel like turnovers is something, just protecting the ball. That's something big I've been working on this spring. But just also, you're never at full potential. There's always room to get better. So just always going over film, seeing what I can do better, just taking everything away every practice.
How different is the offense here that you ran in New Mexico? I know it's the same OC, obviously, but is there any wrinkles that maybe you've had to learn or different things that way?
Yeah, obviously there's a couple things we add on. Certain players can do certain things a little better than other people. So, we stick to their talents, and, there's certain things that they did do good last year in this offense. So we were able to translate a couple of those plays into our new offense. So, yeah, it's great.
Devon, what's your connection like with Hunter Andrews? He switched from running back to tight end, and how's that been going for you guys too?
Yeah, that's huge shout out to him to be able to switch sides and the impact he has on our team already. He can run the ball, catch the ball. He's doing everything. So, huge shout out to him. But yeah, our relationship's great. I'm talking to him after every play. He's taking it. I'm taking what he has to for me. So we're on the same page.
How much easier has it made the installation of this offense, knowing that the offensive line is all, returners from last year?
Yeah, I think that's been the easiest part of this part. Just coming here, they kind of handle a lot of the stuff up front. I make very little calls for them. They're all on the same page as well. So when you got all five guys working on the same page, my job's real easy back there.
As you move into the off season, what's the big goal for you in terms of what you're working on and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is continue to still talk to my guys, even though they're out with their families. You want them to enjoy that time, but just being able to keep that chemistry, because just being away from football, your mind could drift off a little bit. So just making sure I'm keeping in contact with those guys. Sending them clips every once in a while. Let's keep this thing. You've been doing it well all spring. Let's keep this going. Let's get on it summer, and then obviously a couple of weeks before the summer ball, we're gonna get out here and we're gonna work even earlier. So
as the portal opens for spring, are you going to be calling guys that you think belong on this team and help them recruit?
Yeah, as a player, that is my job to also help get the guys that we want to get over here. So I will be participating in that.
All right.
Awesome. Thanks, Devon.
All right, thank you.
Really fascinating things that he said, especially there at the end. I truly believe that he means what he says when he talks about trying to get those guys in the summer, right? Like your mind can drift, he said, and you kind of get locked into the summer mentality and kind of come in and you're not ready in fall like you could be. So, I think he's going to be pushing these teammates really hard in the off season. He obviously has to, do that himself, but there's a lot for him to prove, right? He's jumping to the Power 4 level. He wants to be able to be a guy that is talked about, at the highest level and be compared to the best quarterbacks out there. And to do that, he's going to work really hard in the offseason to be able to keep that team in focus. So, I think that shows the true leadership mentality that he has. I think we've seen a lot of that from him, and it's not fake. Like you talk to him, and it's not just him saying things to be able to get it out in the press and do that. Like this is a guy that genuinely cares. You hear that from the other players. They're not lying about it either. Like this is a guy that absolutely cares about his teammates and wants them to improve. Now, I think if he can get that consistency and get them back earlier and get them back ready to go, that's going to be really important for Utah, especially as they come into this. I'm curious to see, especially if he can get the other quarterbacks to come with him as well, right? It's easy for him to go out there and say, hey, we're going to run routes with the receivers and do different things that way to build chemistry. But is he going to bring the other quarterbacks along and help them? I think that's the true sign of a leader there, is bringing guys in the same position group to come and help, right? It's not just you. It's understanding that, barring some sort of setback, that Dampier can't go, he's got to be able to have guys that behind him that he feels confident in as well, right? I think that's the true leader there, is understanding, the guys behind me have to be just as good as I can be, right? Even if that means they're pushing him harder. Like I said, I don't think either one of those guys are necessarily pushing him for that spot, but I think the more that he can improve and the more that he can have guys that can push him, the better that he can be. So, it's funny when you talk about sports. Like I've heard many times from coaches, they'll say, "Oh, this kid loves football." Like, and forever, it was just kind of like, well, duh, he's playing college football. Like, he has to love football. But the longer that I've got into this, and as my kids have gotten older, and I've been able to coach different teams, I've understood more what that means. There's guys that love to play the sport just because they're good at it. There's guys that love to play the sport because they're good at it, and they also are, eat, sleep, breathe, and drink everything about that sport, right? That's what they mean generally with these guys. These are those guys that, yes, they have to take the necessary time off. You can't go full tilt every time, but you have to take the rest, and then you jump back into that mindset, right? It's the Kobe Bryant mentality where, whatever your weakness was or perceived weakness was, you're going to improve on that and just continue to go and go and go and go until you improve that and make that strong. Jalen Johnson used to do that. Clark Phillips used to do that at Utah. That's the mindset that Utah has to have to be able to improve and be able to get to where they need to be. Utah doesn't have the luxury of coming into this season and just getting by, right? Obviously, the expectations for this team are going to be lower considering what they were last year being picked to win the conference, but that doesn't mean that Utah can just kind of sit back and let the game come to them. This is a team that has to show improvement, and they have to show that things are different. And if they can do that, great, right? Like this is a team that's going to take a lot of pride in that. But it's going to be this type of stuff, the offseason work, that's going to matter the most, where they're going to be able to do things as a player run. There is some stuff where coaches can coach them up and do different things, but they're not allowed to watch any of these things. They're not allowed to, do things that kind of coach on the field, so to speak. And so a lot of this has to be player run. It has to be guys that, want to do it. And the ones that are going to do that and take that seriously are generally going to be the better players, right? And so really curious to see what this offseason looks like, what they do. A lot of these guys will get into the gym, put on some weight, that kind of stuff. So this offseason is going to be pivotal for this team, more so than probably years past, just simply because they've got a lot to prove. And so I'm curious how that goes. So he did mention in there that he will be active in talking to guys in the portal. The portal did open today, and so, there's going to be, it's a 10-day window. There's going to be some movement. There's been some interesting notables there. Jaden Ott, the dynamic running back at Cal, put his name in the portal and then immediately transferred to Oklahoma the next day. So kind of shook up things a little bit there. Oklahoma's going to be pretty good with John Mateer and Jaden Ott there. So that's a big thing. And then there's the whole drama with Nico Iamaleava, QB from Tennessee. He's been getting some bad advice from his dad and some other people that, wanted more money. And so last Friday, Iamaleava decided to hold out and not go up to practice, and Josh Heupel decided to say, you're not on the team anymore. So as part of that, they played a game that really risked his future, and I think people thought, or he thought, that, okay, the risk is great, because even if Tennessee balks and doesn't want to move forward with this, he's going to have options at other schools. And so far, yes, the transfer portal opened up today, but so far, all indications from national media say that, he's kind of a marked man in terms of nobody wanting him. and nobody wants to be able to give him the money that he's requesting, and all that kind of stuff. So just kind of goes to show you that, as much as these players have had a lot of control in this transfer portal era, it doesn't always go that way, right? And bad advice is bad advice. And some of these agents haven't been great. The agents have, they're looking out for their own interest and trying to get more money, and that doesn't always happen. And so in a case like this, where Tennessee felt like they could make the decision that they did, they decided to put the power into their own hands. And so really fascinating to see how this goes. I mean, I think this kind of just shows the level of college sports right now, where there's just not a lot of consistency. There's no collective bargaining agreement like there is in professional leagues, where there's a lot more consistency. And if a guy holds out, that generally means something else. You can have agents that works with it, and it's done generally behind the scenes. It's not played out in the public. And so, it happens, but there's generally more consistency. And so, been fascinating the first few little bit of the transfer portal, even though it did just open today. But not everything goes well. Now, as part of that, focusing on Utah, that was just more of a side tangent. Focusing on Utah, right now, Kyle says there's, the indications are that shouldn't be too crazy, he said. He doesn't expect to lose really anybody. There's guys that are either walk-ons or deep depth players that may leave. But for the most part, he says he hasn't gotten any indications that guys are going to be leaving. Most of those guys, they don't generally go through all of spring camp just to leave. There were already 2 corners, Sammy Hunter and Kumari Shamwell, that did leave, and then freshman QB Wyatt Becker left as well. So there have been guys that have left, couldn't officially enter the portal till today, but there hasn't been any indications of guys that are currently playing on the roster, or at least guys that are contributing players that are there. Now, with that said, that doesn't mean it can't change, right? In this day and age, another team can throw a bunch of cash around and do it. But this portal is generally a little less crazy, at least it has in the past, just because guys have already been practicing with their teams. They've already understood the system. They're trying to get ready for the fall, and trying to come in at fall and be an impact player is kind of tough. So a lot of times you see much more depth pieces here. That's not always the case, but that's generally what happens. So curious to see what happens there as well. But as part of that, there's this kind of hanging NCAA settlement that's there, right? Last week, the judge met with the NCAA, talked about this settlement, and kind of had some concerns before getting it done. All this has to be done by July 1st if things are going to go forward for this season. By all accounts, it seems like that will still happen. But because of that settlement, there has been a lot of talk about programs just throwing a ton more money around right now, doing things that they probably wouldn't do normally, just because they want to get that money out there, get these players before a settlement makes things a little bit different. There is some, players that will be paid. Players will be paid by universities if they opt into the settlement. But then also you've got, a more stringent set of rules for NIL. With that said, I'll believe it when I see it. The NCAA hasn't been great at mandating this or dictating how this goes. They will have a third-party entity that will focus on these NIL and make sure it isn't a pay-for-play. But like I said, I'll believe it when I see it. There hasn't been anything that has really changed there. So as part of that, Kyle says they're not going to change how they do it in this portal. They're not going to just throw around a bunch of cash before this settlement. He says they don't have a vault of cash. That's the phrasing he used. And so unless somebody has some cash that they want to give him to throw at some players, Utah definitely isn't going to change their mindset and how they do things before the settlement. So they're going to be active in this transfer portal period. The 10 days, this gets confusing for a lot of people, and I understand it, but the portal is just for players to enter, right? So the 10 days, you have 10 days essentially to declare your name or to put your name in the portal. I've mentioned this in the past. Generally, that can be 24, 48 hours after where it hits the portal, but they have to declare to their university that they want to be in the portal by those 10 days, right? And then the university has to get that in there. So Players can be picked up after that time. They can be picked up all the way up till fall camp. Generally speaking, you don't see a lot of that go on past, maybe a month. Any guy that is in the portal that teams want will probably pick him up within the next month or so. So any guys that Utah's hoping to get should be happening now-ish through the end of the month, right? Once it turns into March or May, you start especially focusing on your recruits. June is a big, heavy month for official visits and stuff like that. May is being more of that as well. But any guy that is going to be on the roster for the 2025 season will be coming, in the next few weeks. So in terms of what Utah's focus will be, there isn't any major need, right? Obviously, they need to add some depth at certain positions, but there isn't some major need where Utah feels like if we don't get this, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. Now, with that said, there is some depth issues and some things that Utah wants to improve upon. So the big areas of focus that Kyle Whittingham is kind of mentioning is that wide receiver. They want to get at least one other wide receiver, potentially if they can get a guy that can be, a wide receiver one type player. That would be their ideal. They need more depth at defensive tackle, so they'll be looking there. There was already one that was rumored today that Utah's talked to. I retweeted that if you want to go see that. Also, corner, they want to add some depth there. You did lose those two corners that I talked about, and so you're going to add some depth there. And then there's maybe a look at running back. Continue to add some depth there. And then Kyle said they'll always be looking at quarterbacks, every single portal, every time that opens up, no matter when it is, no matter what they have on the roster. Utah will always be looking for a QB, and that's no different than most programs out there. It's arguably the most valuable position out there, and you saw how valuable that was last year for Utah when you didn't have a quarterback that could do it. And so they're going to continue to find guys. Now, that's not to say that they're going to find somebody to replace Dampier, but they're going to find guys that can bring in some depth. So that is challenging, especially with where Utah is at. They do have their starter. They do have, two backups that they feel confident in, but trying to get a guy that's going to come in and understand that he's going to be the backup, that's not an easy thing. So I don't know that you'll see that. That's not to say it couldn't happen, but, that's still going to be there. So those are going to be the focus for Utah. Like I said, nothing too crazy. It's going to be much more of a quiet period. Not me saying that, crazy things will happen and, we'll be back here next week talking about some crazy stuff. But it shouldn't, knock on wood, shouldn't be too crazy for people and things will go kind of smoothly. Utah, its roster is what it is, barring guys that haven't made any indications planning to leave, deciding to leave, or guys, suddenly getting a lot of money from somewhere else. It's not like that hasn't happened before, but we'll see. So with that said, let me tell you real quick about how this spring game is going to go. So Saturday, the spring game will take place at 1 p.m. You can view it on ESPN Plus if you're interested in that. If you're not there at the game. If you are at the game or watching the game, this game is going to be played where the offense is going to be the white team, the red team is going to be the defense, and Scally will obviously call the defense, Beck will call the offense, and there's going to be some points scored for both sides. So it's not just an offensive scoring; it's going to be kind of a different style. The offense is your standard things. 6 points for touchdowns, field goals for 3 points, PATs 1 point. So nothing too different there. The real difference comes from the defense. So the defense can get points as well. They can get 6 points off of a turnover, a touchdown, so a pick six. Turnover, they can get 4 points for that. If they get a stop before the 50-yard line, they get 3 points. Stop after the 50-yard line but hold the team the offense to a field goal, they get 2 points. Anytime they get a sack, it's worth 2 points. A failed 2-point conversion, they get 2 points, and then a safety, they get 2 points. So, you'll see scoring on both sides. Well, both teams are on the field, so really interesting kind of how that's going to go and see how it works. But as part of that, the first half will be 2 10-minute quarters with your regular clock, stop and starts after dead and live balls. Second half will be a running clock, again, 2 10-minute quarters. There won't be any kickoffs, punts, or returns. And then the PATs and field goals, they're not going to be live, so it'll essentially be just a guy up there kicking a field goal if that's what they want to do, without guys coming in and trying to, stop the ball or whatever that may be. And then the last thing is, no matter where the ball or the drive ends, the ball will be placed at the 35-yard line to start the new drive. So a few differences. Obviously, this is a glorified scrimmage, but it's an opportunity for Utah fans to kind of come see. You get to kind of see the offense, especially that the media has seen this spring. I would hope that we could get some of this in the fall where the media could see that, because I do think that it benefits us as well as you as the fan. We can give some context that maybe we didn't have in the past, especially with how limited amount of time that the staff gives us to be able to talk to these coaches. You just can't get enough time with Kyle Whittingham or any of these other coaches to understand what's happening in the game or in practices. And so it would be beneficial. I don't think that's going to change necessarily, but my hope is that we could get some more time in the fall to be able to make it so that it's easier for you guys as well, and understanding kind of what's going on so we could provide context. So Saturday will be the last part of this spring, and then it goes into the offseason and you have no football. So soak it up, get excited, do whatever you need to hype up your team in the preseason lists or whatever it may be. But that'll be the end of spring for this team. Go travel, try not to think about it too much. I know some people think these months go too long and it's too hard to not have football. And I, agree. Just real quick, focusing on men's basketball, Alex Jensen is still with the Dallas Mavericks. The Mavericks did get into a play-in game, so they will be playing the Kings tonight in a play-in game for an opportunity to move forward. If the Mavericks lose, they're out. If they win, they continue to go on and will be in the playoffs. So I know a lot of Utah fans are Kings fans tonight. They want to be able to have Alex Jensen on staff full-time, so we'll be, curious to see how that goes. If you want to go watch that, you can do that, obviously. But as part of that, Utah has 6 players on the roster. They did get a commit today from Kendall Sanders, a small forward from IMG Academy. Not a transfer. He's an incoming class, and so you will have him coming in and being there, as well as the other guys that have been on roster. So you've got James Okonkwo, forward from Akron, who was previously with UNC in West Virginia. You have Terrence Brown that we talked about as a guard from Fairleigh Dickinson who came here. Alvin Jackson III, he's the guard that Craig Smith had gotten to commit to come over from Slick. And then you do keep Keanu Dawes and Ivy Traore. So 6 players right now on the roster. Obviously, Utah has some more work to do. They hosted a bunch of players this weekend on official visits to be able to kind of get some more players here. Really, these are some guys that could be really impactful players if they could sign with Utah. So we'll see what Utah can do. But it's getting to the point now in the transfer portal where Utah really has to start making some moves to shape out a good roster. This first season, it's not going to be easy necessarily. I know a lot of fans want to be able to say they're back in the NCAA tournament. Not to say that Utah couldn't, but it's just going to be a tall task. Essentially having to rebuild an entire roster, and you've got a lot of guys that you're trying to piece together. So not an easy battle. You've got a lot of roster spots to fill, and so we'll see kind of how Alex manages that. He does have his assistant coaches here, Rafael Chilius and Wes Wilcox as his general manager, that are able to do a lot of that and able to really give some insights into that, and obviously we'll be doing his bidding that way. But Utah needs Jensen here to kind of help solidify some of those things. So there's that. And then lastly, the Red Rocks, this is the week of nationals, so they do compete Thursday night at 7 p.m. If they make it into the top 2 of that semifinal, then they make it to the last day of the 4 on the floor, the final 4 teams in the country. Utah does have a tough quad meet for them, so they have UCLA, Michigan State, and number 1 LSU in their semifinal. So 2 top teams will come out of that for a chance to compete on Saturday for a national championship. So this is a team that has done really well. They feel really confident in themselves. They're talking about it more. They're not shying away from wanting to win a national championship. I know sometimes that's kind of the things that teams, they don't want to say. You don't want to jinx it, and so nobody's going to say it. But this is a team that's fully embracing that and really trying hard to get there. This year in gymnastics especially, there hasn't been necessarily one dominant team. You could argue LSU has been that in terms of what they've been able to do as of late, but this is anyone's game. And all it takes is, one bad rotation or one thing that way that can change the game. So this will be an interesting nationals for Utah. They're tired of finishing in third. They've done that for the last, I think, 4 years, if I remember right. And they want to be able to finish higher, obviously. So we'll see what happens. They have the talent to be able to win a national title. The question is if they can hit on all 4 events on the same night. So with that, we're going to close out today's episode. I appreciate you for listening. We'll recap next week the spring game. I'm going to have some special guests coming up here soon. I know I tease that sometimes, and it doesn't always happen. Just hoping we can get these schedules out. Hopefully, eventually, we can have a co-host with me so you don't have to just listen to me forever just talking about the same BS. But hoping we can get some of those changes, and we'll kind of go from there. But we'll have a special guest next week, and potentially one the week after that to be able to talk about some things with football and some other stuff. So I appreciate you listening to me. I really do. You make it worth it to come and do these episodes and talk about the various things going on at Utah. We will continue to go over a bunch of stuff in football in the off season. We'll review schedules, we'll review position groups, that kind of stuff, and kind of go from there. So thank you for listening today, and we will talk to you later.